You see it there, President Trump stepping off of Air Force One. He's back in the United States today and behind closed doors. He's in the Situation Room at this very hour, talking with his top leaders. He is saying he wants more than just a ceasefire between Iran and Israel. So what does that mean? We'll be digging into that in the hour ahead. This while thousands in Tehran, and look at that, jam-packed streets. Thousands of people appear to be heeding President Trump's social media warning. He told them, evacuate Tehran. Trump says he put out that word because he wants people to be safe. Now, Israel also warned the 300,000 people living just there in Iran's capital to leave as well. They're echoing that message. So what is happening and why? Well, the president says he wants a real end. Those are his words to Iran's nuclear program, even as the conflict shows no signs of slowing down. Anytime you doubt it's slowing down, you see those black plumes of smoke there arising from both places, Israel and Iran. In fact, in this strike, we understand dozens have been killed. This is Israel. Hundreds of attacks happening. They're continuing into now day 5, if you're keeping track. President Donald Trump says he wants Iran to completely give up its uranium enrichment program. If they don't willingly give it up, the result will be devastating for Iran. But the president also told reporters he is looking for more than just that ceasefire. Listen to this.
I hope their program's going to be wiped out long before then. But they're not going to have a nuclear weapon.
There's reports that you want to send the vice president and Steve Witkoff to meet with the Iranians and have discussions. Is that something you're considering?
Not sure yet. I may. Depends on what happens when I get back.
What specifically is better than a ceasefire? What are you looking for here?
An end. A real end, not a ceasefire. An end.
So the president went from Air Force One into the Situation Room, and it's a closed meeting. But we do have sort of an idea of what the president is thinking by way of a new post on his social media platform. He is saying we now have complete and total control of the skies over Iran. He says Iran had a good sky tracker and other defensive equipment and plenty of it, but it doesn't compare to American-made, conceived, and manufactured stuff. Nobody does it better, he says, than the good old USA. So we have team coverage of the situation in the Middle East. Standing by, CBS News intelligence and national security reporter Olivia Goss. She's at the State Department, and senior White House correspondent Ed O'Keefe on the North Lawn. So let's begin with you, Ed. Take us through the president's decision to leave the G7 and gather his top advisors in the Situation Room. And also, I'm very curious, your reaction to that post on social media just now.
Well, what we're trying to sort out in that True Social post when he says we now have complete and total control of the skies over Iran.
Right.
Who's we? Does he mean the United States is now actively controlling the skies over Iran? Does he mean Israel? Does he mean Israel in the United States? Or is he just inferring that Iran's capabilities to see what's going on above it are completely wiped out? Any or all of those would be significant developments and an escalation of U.S. involvement in this situation, which is why you can appreciate we're still trying to sort out what exactly the definition of we is. Overnight, as he flew back here from Canada, abruptly ending his attendance at the G7, he signaled he wanted to be here at the White House to closely monitor things and not be, in essence, removed. Yes, the president is the president wherever he is and can do his job from wherever he is, but easier to contain the information and the information flow if all the principals are back here. So he's here. Marco Rubio, his national security advisor and secretary of state, flew back with him. And we have been told by the president himself that he would be in meetings throughout the day here at the White House. Aides have told us that as well. And we're waiting to see when or if we hear or see the president himself speak a little more expansively than what he has just signaled there on Truth Social, Reed.
I would echo what you say. The word we definitely has quite a bit of weight today, Ed. We also understand that Vice President J.D. Vance a short time ago on social media had something to say about Iran. Let's go ahead and look at that right now. Are we pulling that up or are we going to listen to it? Okay, so let's look at the graphic here, Ed, and let's talk about it. There it is. Sometimes those buttons are not as immediate as we'd like them to be. J.D. Vance saying, I've yet to see a single good argument for why Iran needed to enrich uranium well above the threshold for civilian use. I've yet to see, he says, a single good argument for why Iran was justified in violating its non-proliferation obligations. I've yet to see a single good pushback against the IAEA's findings. So what else did Vance have to say? And what's its significance and weight?
Yeah, and he went on to say the president has shown remarkable restraint in keeping our military's focus on protecting our troops and protecting our citizens. He may decide he needs to take further action to end Iranian enrichment. That decision ultimately belongs to the president. And of course, people are right to be worried about foreign entanglements after the last 25 years of, as the vice president calls it, idiotic foreign policy. What this tweet appears designed to do, Reed, is address growing concern, especially among the president's core supporters, about the possibility that the United States is about to get far more deeply involved in another foreign war. Of course, so much of his political legacy and his popularity with his supporters has been that for the last 10 years and one day, as a declared presidential candidate or as president, he has railed against previous Republican administrations that got the United States involved in Afghanistan and Iraq, and other Democratic administrations that have carried on those wars. So what Vance appears to be doing here is sort of saying to the base, hey, let's not forget, for exactly 10 years and one day, the president said Iran shouldn't have a nuclear weapon. So he's being remarkably consistent from a policy perspective. And he's arguing in recent days, the president's very clear, the only way the U.S. military is going to get involved is if Iran hits us, which is why you saw the evacuation of non-essential personnel from State Department facilities and some military bases in the Middle East last week. What he's now saying is, look, if the president decides we've got to go after Iran's ability to enrich, so be it, but it's consistent with what he's done before. We've seen this argument play out. People like Tucker Carlson, who's been an ally of the president before, suggesting the president need not engage in this and it's going to drag his presidency down if he gets involved. The president pushing back on that yesterday. Others in the Republican Party, Lindsey Graham, Tom Cotton among them, suggesting the president needs to be aggressive, needs to go and do what John McCain once suggested as a presidential candidate. Bomb Iran, take out their nuclear capabilities, something that's been talked about for more than 20 years as the Israeli government has developed plans to do this, and maybe on the verge, we don't know, but maybe on the verge of convincing an American president to join them in that endeavor.
Well, if that post on social media by President Trump is any indication, those words have great consequence. History is writing itself in real time, and you have a front row seat. Ed O'Keefe, always great to talk to you. Thank you so much. We'll hear back from you, I'm sure, often throughout the day, I'm sure. So let's now go to the State Department and CBS News intelligence and national security reporter Olivia Goss. So a lot of moving parts. As this conflict goes on, will the U.S. be able to stay out of it? And I just want to get your reaction. You saw the post by President Trump not long ago on social media, to the point that Ed and I were just talking about. He uses the word we and total control. Who do you see there at the State Department as referenced by the word we?
It's a very good question, Reed, and I think, like Ed, we are parsing it here. The message no doubt being sent as a level of reassurance that should the U.S. enter this conflict, that its assets, its military hardware, its personnel are going to be protected from the missile launchers that still exist in Iran. Because up until this point, whether or not the U.S. participated in this conflict has come down to two factors. One, whether Iran directly targeted American interests in the regions, which it has not done. And two, whether President Trump was persuaded by those around him, to include Benjamin Netanyahu, to include the hawks in his cabinet, that now is the time to deal a decisive blow to the Iranian nuclear program. As of yesterday, the messaging from the United States, from the State Department, from the president was still, we are interested in diplomacy, we are in a defensive posture, we are helping Israel as an ally defend itself, and we will come to the defense of our interests in the region. But we are still interested in talks. Something appears to be shifting. We obviously have now a whole lot of military hardware arrived in the region to give the president options, we are told. And you have this messaging both from the president and the vice president that seems to be paving the way to preparing the American people for an entry by the United States into this conflict.
Sometimes those of us in media, many people in politics, we tend to use terms that are very insider baseball, so we throw around things like situation room all the time. But for our viewers from the State Department, what is the situation room? Is it not true that it's less deliberations and discussions and more planning and coordination?
It certainly can be that, and that's why sources have told us that a lot will hinge on this meeting that the president is going to have today. It's where critical national security decisions are made, the president taking the advice of his closest aides on whether to go or not go. The outstanding question, of course, in this conflict is, what is the end goal? The Israeli campaign started out by targeting military installations, nuclear scientists, things that were relegated to the nuclear program. It had expanded in recent days to include things like energy infrastructure, to include things like state television, to include messaging from Benjamin Netanyahu saying that the supreme leader is not out of the question as a target. That is a political assassination that makes this campaign look a lot more like its objective is regime change rather than the destruction and degradation of the nuclear program. And it's an open question as to whether the U.S. signs on to that objective, whether regime change is actually the goal, and what comes after that. This administration has made very clear it has no interest in nation building. It is getting out of that business. And if it is out of that business, well, then what happens if the regime in Iran falls? Who builds that government? Who stabilizes the region? Very, very big questions to grapple with.
Yeah, indeed. And you know, you use a great phrase that I think really captures it: go or not go. And when you think about what's happening in the Situation Room, is it safe to say that the leaders in the United States and the leaders in Israel are looking at opportunity when they gauge go or not go, and they factor into that decision the decimated leadership there in Iran?
Well, look, there's no question that the Israeli military campaign thus far has been extraordinarily effective. They have very strategically targeted military top brass, military installations, and it has illustrated how well penetrated Iran has been from an intelligence standpoint by the Israelis. That required decades of recruitment, or years at least of recruitment, of establishing pattern of life to know where these people are. So they have been able to degrade Iran's capabilities, its leadership, very effectively. But in the past, how has Iran coped with this? They have a deputy for a deputy for a deputy for a deputy, right? So attrition can continue. The broader question is, what replaces the leadership if it falls?
And the big question again is, will the United States get drawn further into this conflict and send more assets? And if not today, is it not already happening, given the words of President Donald Trump on social media? Always a fascinating conversation. Olivia, thank you so much for joining us today.